Welcome to Advocate Today. I'm Tracy E. Gilchrist, and it's time to rock out. The New York Times bestselling novel Daisy Jones and the Six is getting the TV treatment on Prime Video. It follows the highs and lows of fame and music as the group implodes at their peak. I spoke with cast members Riley Keough, Sam Claflin, Suki Waterhouse, and more, as well as the creators, about bringing the story from the pages to the screen and how gender, addiction, and nostalgia figure in. I'd love to begin with you, Riley, and talk a little bit about the role of women in this series, which they're incredibly complex and self-possessed. Even Camilla, who's choosing this role of domesticity for a little while, is a very different kind of character. And Daisy, of course, holds her own with all these big players in music. And would you talk a little bit to playing that?
Yeah, I think that was, I mean, that's definitely what drew me to her character was the idea of this woman who had this much agency in the 70s. I think that things would have been much more complicated for Daisy during that time in that respect and walking into a room and being taken seriously. And that's something I identified with. Being a young woman myself and being in work environments or any kind of environment and feeling like you're constantly having to prove your seat at the table, no matter how established you become, and I think that, yeah, so the idea of somebody being that sort of liberated, I guess that was an era of liberation.
Sam, something that struck me a great deal about Billy and his character is how addiction plays a role in his life. And I think it's a really fascinating way to look at it because he struggles with addiction, but it's at least for what I've seen, it's not his downfall. And he kind of gets a handle, at least for a while, and becomes a family man. And would you talk about the role of addiction in your character's life and in the series?
Well, I think the one thing to remember with addiction is that it's always there, bubbling away. I think there are always struggles, and even when he doesn't have the alcohol and he doesn't have the drugs, he has his exercise and his routine, and then he has Daisy and the music, which is equally as addictive to him. And I think that's obviously what gets him in trouble, somewhat. But I think domesticity and like his sort of dream of that happening is the one thing that kind of keeps him grounded. But he's just obsessive. He's an obsessive, I think, is the best way of describing him, more than an addictive um, personality. I think, and like we were fortunate enough to work with an amazing sort of specialist in the field who's someone who worked with musicians of that era, and who kind of gave us a full rundown of all the drugs that existed in that time and how easily accessible they were, but also talked about the fact that no one really understood addiction back then.
The response that I'm seeing kind of around about this show is how perfectly they have figured out how to make a woman character, a female character. I think that that is like a niche that Taylor Jenkins Reid and Hello Sunshine and Amazon has like figured out the perfect formula how to give the woman the space and also make her complex and also make her intelligent and powerful and charismatic and soulful. And I think all the four women in this show are all of those things. And I think what's so cool about Camilla is even in 1970s, she's kind of pushing the the idea of what it is to be a 1970s
characters that that there's like I think there was moments for us filming too where we're like it feels controversial. It kind of like challenges our own ideas of what women should or shouldn't be doing. It did that for us just as actors, and there's constant conflict in the characters, in the female characters and the male ones, but it was a joy to be able to play women like these ones.
Yeah, and Karen is kind of incredible. She really holds her own with the guys in the band, which, is no easy task. I wanted to ask you a little bit about how nostalgia plays out in Daisy Jones and the Six, and this like really authentic capturing of music of the era and also Los Angeles of the time. And I wonder if you would talk a little bit about what that was like to film in that world, Sebastian.
Yeah, I mean, it's a crazy thing. I thought shooting a show that takes place in the 70s that we would do a lot of stuff on the Paramount lot and have a lot of set builds, but we had almost none. You know, there were like 2 days in total. So we shot actually at the Whiskey A Go Go. Like we shot at the Viper Room and dressed it up like it used to look in the 70s. Like we shot
God.
all over the place. When we were in New Orleans, we shot at the Sanger Theater. We shot all over the place like that. And it was like, it was really just a wild experience to have like, you know, our stages built in real stadiums, you know, and have this be a real experience that we could all, you know, kind of go through together.
And Josh, one of the things that's really kind of prevalent in the series is this idea of kind of found or chosen family with the band, where they, support each other and, go through a lot of difficulties as families do. And would you talk a little bit about playing into that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as someone who's spent time performing in bands, in my life naturally anyway in the past, I certainly feel that, and definitely back in London as well. I really had a lot of found families, as it were, and I feel like that, I think a lot of people can relate to that, and I feel like the show has a really good example of a lot of relationships and the ups and downs of like how people can support one another and things. I feel like there's a lot that people can relate to in this show on that level.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also, I just wanted to touch on, because your character has the chops really to be a front man, but he's kind of not allowed that space. So would you talk a little bit about following one's dreams, or being sidelined by this bigger project?
I mean, I think, yeah, Eddie has a lot of jealousy towards Billy. I think I decided that it starts out as admiration and love, but that for some reason, beyond Billy's understanding, beyond Eddie's understanding, Billy's often putting him down, or doesn't quite focus on him, or never sees him as a peer. And, I think that's just frustrating for him. And over the years, it wears Eddie down, which kind of turns him into this sort of bitter character, which I think a lot of people as artists can go through, because anything in the arts world is just very difficult to succeed in, and so a lot of the time people have to just take what they can get, which I guess is what Eddie's rolling with in this series.
Yeah, wonderful. And then Sebastian, your character kind of is kind of the easygoing one, at least what I've seen so far. And, hops in a van and travels cross country with the rest of them to follow his dreams. Would you talk a little bit about his goals and follow
Yeah.
in that way?
I think that Warren is really easily described as someone who is in constant shock of the opportunities that he's been given. I think at the beginning of the show, the opportunity to play with my best friends in a garage is like, oh my God, what an amazing life, If we ended there and I worked in the steel mill and I got to play with my best friends in a garage for the rest of my life, I'd be happy,
Right. Yeah.
And so they say, oh, we're gonna move to LA. I'm like, okay, I bought a van. Yeah, right, let's do it, Like I'm always like, oh, we moved to LA? Oh my God, now we're playing for 3 people in a bar? Like, this is awesome.
Always grateful.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's something I try to kind of take into myself from this character. I mean, like, everybody needs somebody like that in their lives,
Would you talk a little bit about just the role of nostalgia in this show? Because I was sure feeling that when I was watching it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's this like difference, right, between the nostalgia and sentimentality, and I think we really wanted to explore that we wanted, to have a very romantic view of and feeling and vibe for what it is for these people, for these musicians, as they're really coming together in the beginning. It's a love story about people creating their chosen family,
Yeah.
and I think everyone can relate to that time in their lives, whether or not they wrote great rock and roll songs. And it's a love letter to Los Angeles, and the very specific parts of the city, the venues, like, like Sound City, like the Whiskey, the Troubadour, all those places. And we wanted to celebrate them and have them feel really period accurate. So that was something that was always really important to us as well.
Yeah, and then also Laurel Canyon. I mean, I felt like I was there during the time. So
That's
really,
so
Yeah,
nice.
thank you.
You really,
yeah, I
I
really got a
will say we
feeling.
had We had an amazing team of people who worked so hard. Mike Nelson, who was our producer, really valued authenticity. And we got this wonderful location scout, Jay Trainer, who also had worked on Almost Famous. And he led us to all of these incredible locations. And then Jessica Kender and her production design team really took each of the environments and sort of brought them back to the time period so that they felt incredibly real and lived in and in that moment.
Yeah, we were pinching ourselves every time we walked on set.
Thank you to the cast and executive producers for stopping by. The series really captures Los Angeles during the 70s. Daisy Jones and the Six is streaming now on Prime Video. You can open the Advocate channel wherever you stream for more of my full interviews with the biggest names in Hollywood. I'm Tracy E. Gilchrist, and I'll see you next time.